So we are going to cover your sales gremlins this afternoon. Essentially, what we will do, Geraint and myself, if it will let me go to the next slide, that is. Why is it not letting me? Yeah, there we go. So Geraint and I we'll each do a session of about half an hour, as we normally do. Geraint's covering saboteurs, which is a really posh word, Geraint, and how to tackle them. And also he's going to talk about your PQ brain, which is an action coach word that you're going to find out more about. I will cover your sort of different types of sales styles and how to adapt them to suit buyer personas and what not to do with certain people, etc., which hopefully will be helpful for you. And that, without further ado, we'll have a Q&A in the end for you to ask any questions, but feel free to put them in the chat as we go through. And we can collate them from there if you want. So without any further ado, if this will let me do something, I'm passing over to Geraint.
Hello, everybody. I'm Geraint, and we're looking at saboteurs, what triggers them and what to do about them. And this obviously, so it's not just about sales, but it obviously has a huge impact to sales because our saboteurs can throw us. They can get in the way. So you can check out your own saboteurs. So don't do it now, obviously, but you know, after the session, this is all based on. There's a guy called Shirzad Charmaine. Shirzad Charmaine, what a fantastic name! And he has come up with a thing called positive intelligence. It's very much like your emotional intelligence. But it's about looking at how positivity can really increase your brain power and also get rid of your saboteurs. So I would absolutely get you to check out positiveintelligence.com because that's where you can actually take your saboteurs test. And you can actually look at what are your saboteurs. So next slide, please, Yaf. So before we do that, we're really thinking about you know, what actually gets in our way. And I think certainly as action coach, one of the biggest things that we look at is our mindset. Okay. And I think it's, you know, before we get to our own gremlins, we've got to really look at how we can guide ourselves through our mindset. Now, one of the biggest things is that there are things that we can control and there are things that we can't control. So we always talk about PPT versus ARM. PPT versus ARM. Okay. Fantastic. So absolutely. So next slide, please, Shaf. So PPT, people, places, things, versus action, reaction, mindset. So I cannot control other people. I cannot control places, and I cannot control things. However, I can control my actions, my reactions, and my mindset. Okay. And I think the thing about the mindset is that actually we have two sides to our mindset. We have our inner critic and our believer. So our inner critic and our believer. Now, according to Shirzad Charmaine, you know, so he talks about the critic is really the saboteurs. And really looking at the saboteurs, there are 10 of them. And there are 10 of these little lovelies that control our brain when we're not actually in control of ourselves. So actually, so we're gonna take a look at them. So next slide, please. Yeah. So first, before we do that, what is positive intelligence? So the high Q, the high up PQ, so the high positive intelligence, the more that your mind is your friend. So again, it's your inner believer. And then if you have lower PQ, it means your mind is becoming your worst enemy. So for example, you could be really excited about a sales pitch that is taking place tomorrow. And that's your high PQ because you're really excited about doing something. However, your low PQ is when your brain wakes you up at 3 o'clock in the morning worrying about it. Okay, so it's your best friend and it's your worst enemy at the same time. And it's actually looking at when your brain is your worst enemy, what you can do about it. because what happens is your brain becomes the worst enemy, and then your saboteurs take over, and it becomes even more of a worst enemy. So we're going to look at what those saboteurs are, what triggers them, and then what you can do about them. So next slide, please. So there are three strategies to actually increase your positive intelligence. So the first is to weaken the saboteurs. The second is strengthen the sage within you, and then strengthen the PQ brain. So strengthen your positive intelligence brain. So before we can weaken those saboteurs, we've got to know what they are. Okay, so here we go. So you have 10. There are 10 saboteurs. So the main one, the master saboteur, is the judge. We all have the judge. Okay, so we have the judge. We then have the avoider, the pleaser, hyper-rational, hyper-vigilant, stickler, restless, victim, controller, and hyperachiever. Now, don't be worrying about thinking, oh my goodness, I need to know all of those. If you go on to positiveintelligence.com, you can find out a bit more about this.
And we'll send a recording afterwards.
And we will send, absolutely. So really, if you think about the master one, which is the judge, we are all our worst enemy. We are our worst judge because we judge ourselves. We judge ourselves and we judge others. Okay. So that's our biggest saboteur. So, we judge our friends. We judge our own attitude. We judge their attitude. We judge our failures. We judge our successes. Okay. So, you get the picture. So our judge is our biggest saboteur. And a lot of this all stems from our survivor brain. So when we're very young, we need to survive. So our genes need to carry on. So as a child, the biggest thing that keeps us going is survival. Okay, we have the oldest part of the brain is called the survival brain. It's the limbic brain. So and actually, as a growing adult, we then start to look at how we become more positive. But actually, as a young child, we need to survive. So we get judged. Why did you do that? Oh, why on earth are you doing that for? We're being judged. We then start to realize that that's a pattern, and we start to judge other people. Okay, why did you do that? Okay, so as soon as we start to hear all that, we then start to bring that into our adult lives. So actually, our 5-year-old brain starts to run our 40-year-old or 50-year-old or 30-year-old brain. So all of a sudden, that why did you do that comes out, and we judge ourselves. We judge our business. We judge ourselves when we're making a sales call. Well, why did you say that? Oh, that was awful. That was dreadful. Oh, no one will ever buy from you. You're rubbish. Okay. And it goes on and it goes on and it goes on. So the judge is the biggest part. And as I said, then we have the 9 sub-saboteurs, and they can really kick in depending on how bad your judge is. Okay. So I'm just going to show you the next couple of slides. Now, don't be worrying about these because there's lots of information on, but I wanted to show you mine. So if you could show the next slide, there we go. So these are my results, okay? So we've all got a judge, okay? So these are my saboteurs. So my biggest one is a pleaser, okay? It might sound, oh, that's great, that's nice to be a pleaser. Well, it is. However, these are saboteurs. So I don't live my life as a pleaser, okay? However, when the survivor brain kicks in, so when things are going a little bit wrong, or I get triggered by somebody else's saboteurs, my pleaser kicks in, number 1. And that means I have to try and please someone. However, it comes across to the other person as I might be becoming a little bit sycophantic. I might come across as a bit of a martyr. The fact that I do things and I'll put you first, but actually I won't put myself, so I'll put myself second. And of course that can come across as bad. It can come across very badly to the other person. So these saboteurs are not great. And they're not how we live our lives fully. Okay, they are just in the moment of when when we get our inner brain is triggered. Okay, so we don't live our lives as a controller. We don't live our lives as a victim or as an avoider, but they are triggered by certain behaviors and certain ways our brain and our judge reacts to allow us to start thinking like this. Okay, so if I, over the next couple of slides, if I show you, or if Yafs does, you can just click onto the next couple. So here you see, you can, again, once you take your test, your positive intelligence test and your saboteur test, you can actually go through and actually some of the things here, like for example, pleaser, indirectly tries to gain acceptance and affection by helping, pleasing, rescuing, or flattering, loses sight of own needs and becomes resentful as a result. Okay, so you can see then hyperachiever and victim. So all of these have, there are elements of your, I suppose, that sub-personalities of part of you, but they are all led by and judged by the judge. Okay. So if you can go to the next one and then the next one, so you can see they're all partly, you can see as mine, I don't have a stickler in mine, so it's about perfectionism. Hey, so thank goodness. Phew. But again, for some people, having that perfectionism is absolutely key to what they need to do. And actually, if you think about perfectionism in selling, and actually if things aren't going right and you've got to be a perfectionist, what might happen? Well, actually, it might be the fact, well, oh, do you know what? I won't make that call because I'm not quite right today. I'll wait for tomorrow. I'm feeling better tomorrow. I'll be better. I'll be perfect tomorrow. And then you procrastinate, and then you procrastinate, and you procrastinate, and you stop selling. Okay. So all of these saboteurs get in the way of our lives. And obviously, as part of that, it is selling. So depending on what your saboteurs are, they can have a massive impact on different parts of our lives and different parts of our selling lives. So what do we need to do about it? So I think, first of all, I'm going to ask you, now obviously it's very, very, very difficult because you don't really know what your saboteurs are, but I'm going to just ask you really quickly, what might trigger some of your saboteurs? What might trigger some of these inner critics? So I can either put them in the chat or you can just shout out. I mean, there's not many of us. So, shout out. What do you think? What might trigger some of your saboteurs?
Like overthinking it.
Overthinking? Yeah, absolutely. Can you give me an example, James? When you might have overthought something and...
Yeah, so prime example is like what you're saying about being in bed and thinking about it. If I got like a big sales meeting or something which I'm not comfortable in, it just comes in my brain in the worst time. So all night I'll just be thinking about it, and then you hype it up so much. And the worst part about it is you go into those meetings really nervous, and then it's kind of irrelevant because it all works out in the end. And then after you're like, oh, I said the wrong thing, I did the wrong thing, but it doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
That's kind of the way I look at it now.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things where we can really be sideswiped by these, and actually all it is, it's up here. It's our brains that are taking over, and it's those saboteurs that have taken over, and it's those triggers, and that's our mindset. And what did I say before about what you can control? You can control your mindset. So this is about us being able to take control of this. Because as I said before, it's no good our 5-year-old self running our business. That our business has no need for our 5-year-old self. But these are there because as our 5-year-old, this is how we survived. But what we need to think about now is rather than our survivor brain, we need to go into our positive brain. So absolutely. So looking at our triggers. So if we now go on to the next slide for me, Yaf, please, we can really start looking at the sage powers. So there are 5 sage powers, and these are where by thinking about the saboteurs and really thinking about what's going on in your brain and what's going on in your mind, you can actually start laser-like focusing on what you can do to stop them. So there are 5. And they're here on the screen. So they empathize, explore, innovate, navigate, and activate. So really empathize. Now, this is the biggest one because your judge won't want you to empathize. Okay. Your judge is the one that says, oh, you need to be tough on yourself. Why are you being more tough on yourself? Okay. We've all heard that before. Okay. So actually, by empathizing with yourself and others about, looking at how difficult something might have been, or understanding what the journey might have been. And one of the biggest things here is to visualize your inner child. Visualize yourself at 3. Okay. Visualize yourself as that innocent little child that knows nothing. Okay. And actually, when you start thinking like that, your brain can actually start using that and saying, do you know what? Yeah, I get this. I get that they are. And actually, if you were then to look at the other person's, so for example, if you're judging someone else, you're judging that person on the other end of the phone that won't buy from you. Okay, you're judging them. Actually, visualize their 3-year-old self. Okay. Don't think about how old they are now and what they're doing to you, because they're not doing anything to you. But again, our brains are playing tricks. Think about them as a 3-year-old and empathize with the situation that they're in. And then once you start empathizing, you can start exploring. And exploring is really useful to understand a situation or a problem. Ask yourself, what more can I discover? And start thinking about new ways rather than the old ways. So looking at new challenges and learning from mistakes and failures. Because if we always do the same thing the same way, we go back into our old habits and we go back into our survivor brain and where our saboteurs take over again. After this point, we then look at innovating. So breaking out of our boxes. Okay, getting rid of old ways and off our autopilot. So our brains are inherently lazy. So by looking at new things and doing something new, we change that autopilot. We change what's a whole new way to do this? Ask yourself, what is the new way to do this? And a really useful way of doing this is by saying yes and rather than no but. So the next time someone asks you something or tells you something and you go, no, that won't work. Yes, it might do. And yes, and. So try that. And it's a really, really useful way of actually exploring and innovating new thoughts. Once you've done that, we're looking at navigating. And that's really about listening to what's going on in your inner self, that inner believer. Not the inner critic, but the inner believer. And choose between the various paths and alternatives that come up. And this is really based on your internal compass. Okay, what you know to be truly right. And then once you've done that, you can activate. And activate it is really understanding where you need to go and actually taking part. So activate is part of action. So really have that laser-like focus on what you need to do. And because you've really done these 5 stages, what you're doing is you've really focused in on using those powers, and it quietens the mind and allows for real action to take place. So because you're doing it, you're not being all guns blazing. You're actually being really focused, and because of that, it quietens the mind down and allows you to really think of what you need to do. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah. So the next part of this is to really, so we've weakened your saboteurs. We have strengthened the sage powers. The last part is to actually strengthen your PQ brain, so that positive intelligence. And the first thing to do is really to understand the difference between your positive brain and your survivor brain. So the survivor brain is really about the fight or flight response. And we all know about the fight or flight response. And the judge rules the survivor brain. Okay. And the survivor brain then fuels your saboteurs. So you can see it's a catch-22 and it goes round and round. And actually, if you think about it from a selling perspective, selling equals a lot of rejection. Okay, can equal a lot of rejection, and rejection sets off the survivor brain. So it's really easy for selling, or for you to be involved in any sort of selling situation, for your survivor brain, i.e. your saboteurs, to be kicked in really, really, really quickly. So it's about knowing that actually it's where the sage and the PQ brain, so that positive intelligence brain, gains a perspective and its powers. So by really thinking about the area of the brain of the positive intelligence and how it can actually be increased. And there are a series of exercises that you can do. And I think that the easiest way is actually to bringing your attention to a part of your body. So for example, your fingers, or your breathing, or the way your shirt feels against your cuff or your arm. And stay in that thought for about 10 seconds and repeat throughout the day. And all of that is, it's very much like emotional intelligence. It's bringing attention to parts of your body, to your senses. So think about the smells, the sense about the taste, think about the sounds that you hear throughout the day. And the more you can do this, you can actually start bringing up your positive brain. So if you think about it, selling is one of those activities that really can easily trigger one of your saboteurs, or all of the saboteurs. So being aware of them, what triggers them, and then how to manage them are valuable tools to have as part of your armor, so that you can sell better and also engage your PQ brain rather than your survivor brain. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Geraint. That was great. I really enjoyed that, and I learned a lot from it. And what we're going to do is we're going to move on to my session, and we'll have some time to ask questions in the end. But if anybody's got a burning question that they can't wait, we can do that now. No, everyone's been very polite today. Okay. So I want some participation, please, in the chat. Can you put your hand up in the chat? If you have more than 10 opportunities on your pipeline at the moment that aren't closing, put your hand up. Have a relative, normally you convert really well, but at the moment you're not, and you're feeling frustrated because nobody's making decisions. Anyone? I'm not seeing anything on the chat. Yeah, Geraint, well done. Anybody else feeling like that? Might not, so it is, you know, everyone's different, but certainly I went through that a little bit earlier in the after the summer. I mean, there's loads of reasons that you could add and attribute to this. So COVID, our favorite C word, you know, Christmas is coming and everyone always uses Christmas. I don't know why, it's 2 weeks of the year, but you know. There's the Great Resignation. Have you heard of that? And you know, all we need really is snow, and then no one will make any decisions, and everyone will just go home, and everything will be shut down. So you know, this time of year is a bit of a funny time of year, really. But I have to say that if I've learned one thing, is that there's always a reason not to make a decision. So people will always find a reason not to make a decision, and in fact, as it says on the screen, 70% of sales decisions are basically made to do nothing. So people just decide not to change, to keep the status quo. So actually, you're fighting that resistance to change is a massive thing. And Action Coach talk about it quite a lot. They got a good formula for it. So I think that because of that, when it comes to selling, margins make a real difference. And it's really, really important to really think about things if you want to make a difference. So knowing what your sales style is, what you feel comfortable in when you're selling, and what other people revert to when they're buying is really important. A lot of it is based on DISC research. I really like DISC. I find it really useful and helpful and clear. So I use it a lot. But there's obviously, you do too, Geraint. But yeah. There's a lot of others that you could use. You know, don't have to use DISC if you don't like it. And I think that it's also important to think about the speed that people make decisions at, as well as their communication style, because a lot of people take time to make decisions, and doesn't mean they're saying no. You know, it just means you have to stick with them. Honestly, I have a feeling I'm about to convert one of the guys I've been talking to. We've been talking to him for about 3 years now. You know, it
Wow.
just takes time. You've got to be patient. It's a virtue. Did you know? So starting with your sales styles, there's loads and loads of information about sales styles, but I found an old blog that I wrote about 3 years ago, and if this is my own version of sales styles. See if you can find yourself in any of them. So the apologetic style, anybody? That's saying sorry every 5 minutes and apologizing for your existence and apologizing for having to ask for money and apologizing for everything on the planet. That's one style that I come across. Some people like it. Stealth is people who just don't sell, essentially. So essentially they'll meet with you and they'll chat with you and they'll talk to you, and then they'll go away and they'll do a service, and then they'll basically send you a bill for it, but you haven't agreed the money, you haven't agreed the price. They just kind of come in and talk to you about things and then go away and assume that a sale was made. I don't know if any of you have ever come across something like that. I have. Nosy, it's people that like to ask questions, really find everything interesting, want to know more about your personal life, want to know more about your business, really want to understand why is this and why is that. It's like when they were kids, they must have asked why all the time. Then you've got the pushy style. So when people think about selling, mostly they think about pushy people, about this pushy style of people that, are coming in and really pushing for the sale. And then they always try another angle and they don't stop. It really is very effective with some people, the pushy style. Sometimes you do need to bring up the pushy person in you, even if you feel that it's wrong. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just you need to see how you use it. And then the final one is the friendly style. So, it used to be when I first started selling like 300 years ago, they used to tell us always to ask people about their, how was their holiday? When you go to the hairdresser and they ask you if you've got any plans for the weekend, that sort of thing used to be quite popular when I was young, a long time ago. But you don't have to be friendly. You don't have to ask people about their holidays, but it is useful, particularly if you're quite businesslike, to come in and sort of notice the room. I mean, take a leaf from Geraint's advice about sort of paying attention to things, taking a bit of time, not going straight for the killer, but look around and go and maybe ask a few questions about what's in the room, if it's right. Yeah, it depends on the other person's style. So these are the selling styles that you might revert into. You might use a number of them. You might just have the one style you feel comfortable in. But if we start with those, and then we look into the buying personas and how those fit in. So the first buying persona is a decisive type, and I love this picture of the monkey. So they really like to make the decisions. They like to feel like they're in the driving seat, and they really are interested in results. They're not necessarily very communicative or very good at emotional intelligence. They can be, but they're not. It's not not necessarily. They can be quite to the point. Tell me what you got. How's it going to work for me? And have you got any examples of where it's worked? So I think that with these people, if you're going to go into details and start telling them about, the history of your company, the history of the product, every nitty gritty, you'll lose them within 5 minutes. These are bullet point people. You've got to stick to the point and be quite quick with it. Doesn't mean you can't have banter. I think they quite like banter and humor and, being, I think they react well to confident people. So whether you're confident or not, you can always pretend. I think apologetic does work for some of these people. If you're going to be quite weak and meek and you kind of come in and there's some of them would like that. I personally don't like that style myself, but if it works for you, if you, jumping out of a cake gets you a sale, I say do it. And pushy, I think, is quite important with these people. So, you can adopt either side, really. You can either sort of go with them, agree with them, give them exactly what they want, and then they'll go with it, or be quite pushy and quite strong with them. So it depends on the person. But you can see, where this will fit in. In terms of the interactive types, So I think that they really like discounts. They want to feel special. They want you to be personable with them, chat with them, ask them loads of questions, become their best friend, listen to them, really appreciate them, because a lot of them do find it quite hard to be appreciated and you know, in the workplace. So actually, if you come in and you give them all this attention, actually they love it. Again, they're not detailed, but they're very different to the D. Whereas the D can handle details if they're important, these people really do not find details very helpful. So that's important to remember, to adopt it and make it, you know, your present. You got to think about it from lots of different directions. So, you know, it's not just your meeting with them or your presentation. It's also, what does the proposal look like? How is it written? You know, I always have masses of pictures on mine, and other people have less pictures, and, you know, maybe somebody who's not into pictures find my slides really busy. So it's thinking about these things, personalize them, you know, when you're going to sort of sell to someone. I think friendly really works with these people. Nosy, they love being interviewed and being asked a lot of questions, and so, you know, being in the center of attention. And it really helps you, because the more, if you've been to our sales webinars before, we always talk about, you know, knowledge is your weapon. The more you know, the more you sell. So, you know, these people love it, so use it. Just ask them loads of questions. So then number 3 is the stabilizer type, the people who like to keep to the status quo and not rock the boat. They're very, you know, they're very caring. They really look after people. They really are sort of the center point of their organization in that way. They'd like to keep things all going and ticking well. So they don't make decisions fast, these people. This is one of the biggest things to remember about them. They don't like to make decisions. They don't like to be put in a corner and told to make a decision. They also worry about big changes, because they think it will hurt other people, and they always think about the organization and how it's all going to fit in. But they do want to understand. So being specific is really important to them. Just giving them these, like, you know, throwaway comments or generalizing is not helpful. They want to understand how your product will fit in, and why is it important, and how is it going to make change, and how will it affect other people. So I think friendly with these people is good, but don't be over familiar. Respect them, give them space. But certainly sort of, you know, you want, I think your main focus with these people is to build trust, because they don't necessarily trust someone they don't know. They don't like change. They don't like other people they don't know. So it's building trust. So being friendly is helpful with that, but being over familiar isn't. So, you know, a lot of it is obviously, you know, there's a lot of detail in it, and what we're doing is just, you know, looking at the top of the iceberg, but it's just trying to give you the headlines, really. And then the last one is the conscientious type, or C, as they're known, high C. Very detailed people. The reason I have this guy sitting under the table with, well, you can't see the computer, but a lot of computer people, a lot of tech people, a lot of people who deal with data boffins are C style. They're very into detail. That's all that matters. You know, if you're going to give them something that's general, that has no detail, that isn't accurate, then, you know, they're not interested. I had a guy who refused to meet me once because I put a spelling mistake in the meeting invitation. I think it wasn't a big spelling mistake. It was something quite silly. And the guy, he cancelled the meeting, and he said to me, I cannot deal with people who can't spell. I was like, fine, whatever. You know, if he can't deal with people who can't spell it, obviously I can't deal with him. So, you know, but it is that important to them. And they hate mistakes. I mean, if they themselves, they judge themselves very, very severely, don't they, Geraint? And yep. If they make a mistake, that's terrible, you know. And I think there's quite a lot of business owners who are high Cs, so you do see them a lot. And so what they want is details and proofs. So if you're telling them something does this, they need to see it. They're very used to thinking about processes, because that's how they work. So they need to see how your product or service fits into their service, into the system that they already have, into the process they already put, and how it's going to work and what's it going to provide them. And, you know, case studies, but ones where people specifically talk about specifics, Anything that you can show them where other people have done something and it's worked is really good with them. They don't like the S types, they don't like making quick decisions. And they certainly don't want to know about your latest holiday. So, anyone coming in, talking to them about or asking them too many questions, personal questions, it's not right. Both with the S and the C types, you've got to build a relationship a bit slowly, and you've got to really build, kind of win their trust, work with them, really try to kind of align yourself with them. I think they would really appreciate that. And so nosy sales style is important, asking a lot of questions, but not doing that in an intrusive way. And really try to understand the details they tell you, because that's so key. So if they took the time to explain their problem to you and you didn't listen, well, I don't think you're going to make a sale. So that's my last sort of the last buyer type that I wanted to talk about. So this you can't have a webinar without a Zig Ziglar quote. This is one that we've adopted as a business as well, because I think a lot of what we do is about helping you to create initial trust with people, because we follow up and nurture the leads and keep in touch. So it's thinking about the right sales style, etc., is really key. So I was going to go into questions. We do have a little bit of time as well. I'm just wondering if anyone minds sharing what they think is their sales style, and and how it's worked for them or not in the past. Anyone mind talking about that?
I just shared my disc profile. I find it interesting because I don't really know too much about it, but I find the results quite interesting. So
okay,
because we know each other quite well, yeah. I wonder what you think to my profile.
I don't. It's a really good question, actually. What would you think, Geraint?
I'm just having a look. So you're natural, and then you've got your adapted style. That makes sense for the, because obviously, so there you can see. So you can see if you all click on it, you can see that James is where. So you've got the little round dot, and then you've got the little black star. So what you have with disc profiling, very much obviously as Yaf was talking about, you have a natural style that you do normally, and then you have an adapted style that you have at work. Excuse me. And that makes sense for you, James, because obviously of what you do. So you need to be much more, you need to have that, you need to be a bit more analytical when you're at work. So for example, mine, I'm an I. I'm a high I. I'm very persuasive in that respect, and so my natural and my adaptive are exactly the same. I'm just an I. So I have to be very careful when I'm talking to a high D style or a high C. And so a high C, for example, as Yaf was saying about the very analytical. So a high I is almost the polar opposite of a high C. And they can sometimes see as they're almost like their nemesis, because high eyes don't take any notice of any detail. We get distracted by thin air, and whereas a C is very analytical, needs detail. Whereas I don't do detail. I get bored with it. I get absolutely bored with it. And I've got to be really careful with that. Obviously, when talking to people who are much more analytical, who are much more detail focused. And I think the biggest thing about this is what you can't do is you cannot expect somebody else to change their style for you. You have to change your style for them. So one of the big things that we always talk about is when you're talking to somebody, first of all, and you say, "Hello, how are you?" And if they go, "Yeah, great, thanks," they're not a people person. Okay? they are task focused. So if you think about a high D, so again, assertive, decision makers, and then the C, so very data and facts driven. They're not people focused. So if they say yes, great, thanks, and they don't ask how you are, you know they're either going to be a decision maker, so they're a D, or someone who's very highly not critical, analytical, so conscientious. Someone who says, oh yeah, great, thanks, how are you doing? Then they're generally going to be someone who is very persuasive, an I, or someone who's very supportive, an S. So again, very much that people focused rather than task focused. And that's a really, really easy way of spotting somebody really quickly. And you can then very much adapt to their style really quickly. And that's one of the biggest things I found by using DISC or knowing what people's styles are, because you can adapt to them and then you can sell much quicker, or you can be much more in their frame of mind, and therefore either sell to them or actually get to know them and to actually build up that rapport, because no matter what style you've got, you still need to build up that rapport and that trust.
Personally, what I do in my pipeline is I actually color code it. So I actually color code it to what I think their type is. And then I keep looking at it. So if stuff gets stuck, so they don't make a decision, I then sort of revert to looking at how I can move it forward. And so the first thing is to understand what's sticking it and to understand whether it's a real opportunity or not. If it isn't an opportunity, then just delete it, be savage, don't keep it on your pipeline just to show that you've got loads of opportunities. But then the ones that you really can't understand, why is that not gone anywhere, just really think about what your what is their style and what style have you used and what can you do to make it better. And sometimes it makes sense to give them a call and ask them. Other times you might come up with things yourself, and then you could send them an email and say, look, I know we're talking, but we haven't quite got a decision. Well, I thought maybe this will help, and send them a graph with a bit more details or a case study, or but really it sounds like soft skills, but selling is a soft skill, but it does actually make a big difference to conversion, is thinking about have I used the right style here? And after you get to know people, you might also discover that initially you thought they were D, but actually they're a DI. So there is a side to them that likes the the friendliness, and maybe you've been a bit too businesslike, so you want to maybe invite them to play golf, or it's just really thinking about how you could move it forward, and how you could use this type of intelligence to close the sales, or close more sales, shall we say.
Interesting.
I think Angela raised her hand a second ago. Did you have a question?
Okay, sorry, I can't see everyone. Thanks, Grind. Angela, go ahead.
Yeah, I do have a question. Bear with me. Hi. So the question I was going to ask is, several questions. The first to James is, where did you go to get your DISC profile?
I was actually sent it by Action Coach.
Action Coach?
I'm sure Geraint would be more than happy to send you one.
Okay. Thank you very much, Geraint. Thanks, James.
Right, will you be happy to send Angela one? So yes, Angela, do you want to share your email in the chat, and then Geraint can send you
of course.
a link.
The next question was just out of interest, what colours do you use for each of the, presumably red for D?
Yeah, so I use red for D, blue for, because there is also like DISC, there's another company called Insights that does it all with colors. So you've got the cool blue, which is the detailed, the accountant person. You've got the sunshine yellow, which is the high I, the people who are friendly, etc., over friendly, like right. Red is D, and then you've got green, which is these kind of the peacemakers, etc. So these are colors I use, because when I was at Yale, they used to use Insight as opposed to DISC, so I learned the colors then. So
okay, and the actual question that I put my hand up for is, if you're more of a C type person, then you are more task, which I am, I perceive, but hopefully I'll get clarification when I do the test. But you're more task orientated and more introvert, which is probably as far from sales as you could possibly be. So how do you actually incorporate that knowledge when you're in terms of self-awareness and overcoming your own limitations, as it were, where your strengths are good in other areas, but when it comes to sales, it's not necessarily a strength,
or it could be a saboteur, like Geraint was saying in his bit. I mean, yeah, I think that the disc is great because you do get this really, I don't know if you've seen it, but I'm assuming a lot of people have. It's like you get a full report that tells you everything about, you know, what's your personality type, but also how it differs at home and work. How do you relate to other people? What are your weaknesses? What are your strengths? Things to watch for? How should your employer, if you have one, or your staff, sort of treat you? You can also even get an under the bonnet type thing, which says actually for you are maybe a C, but you've got a few things which actually are outside of that profile, and these are those things. So it sort of shows where you're unique. So it's really useful. I mean, we use it all the time when we recruit people, and also when we have new employees to sort of work together as a team, understand what each other's sales personality styles are. But for selling, I think I absolutely agree with Geraint in terms of the fact that it really is a thing that brings a lot of sort of resentment in us, you know, because we don't like to feel that we're running after people, or we don't like to feel rejected, or we don't like it when people question how great we are, or, you know, there's loads of things that happen when you sell that make you feel uncomfortable, and it's different for everybody. So I think once you know your areas of weakness to watch, and weakness is probably the wrong word, Geraint, I'm sorry, it's not a coachy word, areas that you need to watch for, you know, and it really does help you become more aware. And I think that awareness is the answer to it, in the sense that you know that when somebody questions you, or they're being a bit aggressive with you, it brings up that sort of feeling, and you're aware, you're going, okay, I'm feeling defensive, but I'm not going to become defensive. I'm going to listen, and then I'm going to react specifically to what is asked of me, as opposed to bringing in all of these things that it makes me feel.
Call you back.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Could I add something on there as well? Yeah.
Yeah, of course you can, Rich. Go ahead.
Yeah, if you haven't done a disc profile, Angela, I would say it's worthwhile. It's just very interesting to find out about yourself. But what I think is very good, especially with the this profile which Action Coach use, is that although you may have a stronger personality if it's a D, an I, an S, or a C, some people are just that one. They will be hiding under the desk because they're frightened of everything's got to be so precise and exact in that way. Other people are just the high D, and they're out there. There's two ways of doing things, their way and the wrong way. You know, they're literally like that. But most people tend to be a combination of all of those four areas. And you might say, yeah, well, I'm probably a little bit more D, I, S, or C than other areas, but you still got a little bit of those bits in you as well. And certainly when you're dealing with other people, it can actually brighten up, saying, actually, yeah, I can see they're a bit D. I need to be a little bit more D in this area. I've got it in me, and I'll just bring that element of my personality out. This person is a little bit more outgoing and, you know, very Geraint. So I'll be a little bit more Geraint in that way, a little bit more sort of jovial as we go forward. And then just picking up, as Yaf said, on some people saying, hey, I know this person is a real stickler. They're asking lots of questions. Every time I send them an email, I'm going to make sure I've gone through spell check and a few other things as well to do it that way. So it's really useful in the fact that you can, I say, you get a better understanding of yourself. Yeah. I suppose that's a little bit down to what you were saying, you know, that empathize, explore, the innovate, the navigate, the activate. If you understand who you are, and you can sometimes see there might be a mirror image of some of your personality in the other person, you can kind of lock into that and say, I'll bring that a little bit more to the fore, and I'll talk on that level. And then you've got that empathy, and you're probably going to be in a situation where chances are the other person won't realize you're selling, because they just say, I like this person. And, you know, you're back to Zig Ziglar. They like what you say. They trust you. They'll buy from you. It's as simple as that, you know.
Thanks,
Brilliant.
Rich. That's really helpful. Does anybody else have any questions or anything else that they want to say or contribute?
I do.
You can't
that's all
see
right.
everyone, so you just need to speak. Jonathan, did I hear you?
Yeah, sorry, my video's not on either. Apologies. Hello. First of all, thank you both. Geraint, I really liked your bit a few minutes ago when you said about some handy ways of being able to say, find somebody out what they are by just saying, hi, how are you? So in my customer base, they all think they're going to change the world. So they're always really interactive. So they want to tell you everything about everything all the time. So immediately everyone seems to be, is it a high eye? I'm trying to get
Yeah, potentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that may be what they're trying to tell you about themselves, but may not be what they actually are. Have you got any other hints to delve a little bit deeper into what their buying style is, rather than them trying to persuade you to work with them?
So I think it's one thing is with an eye. If you allow them, because eyes are storytellers. So you will soon see, because I think that the thing about it is you can't really hide this stuff, because if you allow somebody to actually to be their natural style, that they will show up. So they will show up how they are. So actually, so again, it is knowing, and I think that's why it's unless you know it, it's quite a difficult one to actually really start to look at it. But that's why it's such a useful tool, because this can be used across the board. But once you do start to see it, you can see, for example, with an eye, it's actually getting them to. I mean, you'll have to pull them off the ceiling, because they'll just go off at complete tangents. And so, by praising them and saying, well, where would you like to go with this? Because you're praising them and you're going, oh, okay, it's all about me. And with an eye, it's all about them. So by really listening to what they're saying and listening to the answers they're giving, then you can work out whether they are an eye or not. But again, I think it's one of those things, Luke, where you won't get somebody who can pretend for long to be an eye, because it's what they are. And I think it's by tapping in and listening to what people are, and actually to actually whether they're actually. So that you've got the indirect and open or guarded, so it's open or guarded, indirect or direct, and it's about whether or not somebody wants to tell them about you, or whether they actually want to keep everything, a bit like Yaf was saying about that nosy style. So an eye is nosy. They want to find out as much as they possibly can, whereas a C is much more guarded, and they will keep everything in. So it's by listening in and really finding out. So, for example, if you know that they're a C style, it's asking them questions that reveals their expertise. So keeping questions focused on the topic, emphasizing the value, precision, stability, reliability, sticking to facts and logic. So, and I think, and then if you think about something who is with an S style, who's much more about building relationships. So it's really thinking about how we can work together rather than you work together, how we can work together on this. Never really interrupt them, because if they feel as if they're being interrupted, you're threatening their sense of being at one with you, because they want to actually start to build that relationship with you. And then someone like a D, they don't want small talk necessarily. They want information. So they're not like, as Yafit was saying before, they're quite similar to that C style. They still want to. They still like to be interactive, but they don't want small talk. They want you to have results. So they always think about, what do you want out of this? So be outcome focused. Whereas an I doesn't really care. They just want to like you. So things like paperwork, do the paperwork for them. So slow them down, because they will go off at 100 miles an hour. Whereas a C and an S will be much more slow. And actually, if you're trying to rush them through, they'll just stop buying from you. Does that help, John?
Actually, it really does. It also tells me that I've got a lot to learn.
Yes, you always say that, Jonathan.
Oh well,
That's a good. It's a good thing to be like that, to want to learn all the time.
Well, and my other question, if it was actually for you.
Okay.
What am I?
You, I think you're high C.
I see. Okay, cool. I was curious as to how my self-analysis would work, but yeah.
But it will be interesting to actually do a profile, I think. So to look at that, because obviously I'm no expert in disc, so
Neither am I. Fine. Thank you both.
no worries.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Anyone? Sorry, Geraint?
No, I said pleasure. Thank you.
Anybody else wants to say anything at all?
I was just going to say that I was a person who was certainly not a salesperson a long time ago, and I used the red, yellow, green, blue colours rather than the disc, which is more or less the same thing. And one of the things that stuck in my head, first of all, when you ask them a question and they just say yes or no, and you think, what do I say next? I'd actually had to train myself to do the choice question bit. And we did a little thing years ago about going in the New York Marathon. And, all the different people that you meet would perhaps be persuaded to go in the New York Marathon because of a certain mindset of their own, which tallies with the colours. So someone who's very analytical is going to say, well, if there's so many people running, then we're going to raise so much more money. Someone else will say, well, I'll do it because I love what, I'm going to give my money to charity. It's going to help little children or baby lambs. And someone else might want to say, well, I want to prove a point and I want to beat my time. And it's kind of, before you go to see somebody, think about all the reasons that they might want to see you, and what might affect their decision making. So then have the answers ready for those 4 different kinds. And that's helped me immensely over the years. So I just thought I'd share that with you.
Yeah, it's a great tip. Really good. Thank you. And I think, Geraint, that Angela had shared her email address.
Yes, she has. I've got it. I've got it. I will email you back, Angela.
So, and there's a question from Emma as well. Is it a question? Great presentation. To work out my type. Yes, important. Thank you very much. So this is everything from us today. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Andrew.